Every day, there are incredible preparedness deals floating around the internet, but who has time to dig through dozens of websites to find them? That's why we created PrepperFinds.com, your one-stop site for the best prepper deals online. Our team scans the web, finds the biggest discounts on survival gear, food storage, water filters, radios, and more, and posts them in one easy place. No more wasting hours searching or missing out on limited time sales. At PrepperFinds.com, you'll see the best deals every single day, so you can save money while stocking up on what really matters. Check it out today at PrepperFinds.com. Bookmark it, visit daily, and never miss a deal that could keep your family prepared. That's PrepperFinds.com, where smart preppers shop.
Survive, thrive, stay alive. It's time to get prepared with the Prepping Academy podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in to another episode of Grid Down Comms Up on the Prepping Academy podcast. I'm Patrick, your host. I want to welcome everyone in on this cold January evening as we are all getting ready for the approaching Snowmageddon ice storm snow of doom that is coming soon here. I haven't been with you guys in a while. I got the super flu and some other kind of flu back to back and spent most of the month of December feeling very, very poorly. And no one wanted to listen to me cough every 2 minutes on a podcast. So I've kind of stayed away from the microphone for a little while. But I'm back in the chair behind the not so golden microphone and want to sit down and talk with you guys about a couple things tonight. We're going to talk about the Verizon outage that happened last week. Maybe a little longer than that by the time you hear this. Also want to talk about the winter storm that is coming this weekend. And we're going to kind of do that first. There's been a lot of different predictions. There's a lot of different ideas of what is going to hit where and when over the next 96 hours or so. And frankly, I don't have any better idea than anyone else as what's going to happen. I'm getting ready for the worst case, which could be some ice, but I'm hoping for snow. So we'll see what we get here in about 48 to 72 hours when it arrives. But I want to talk to you guys about preparing for a winter storm and a few interesting tidbits of information that may help you along your journey while getting ready for whatever's coming your way this weekend. Hopefully nothing too bad. First, one of the big things that we all have to think about whenever there's a winter storm, particularly an ice storm, is damage to critical infrastructure. This includes telephone lines, power lines, and all of that good stuff. Most of us are somewhat dependent on electricity to provide heat. Either it's to run the air handler at our home, or it is to run our heat pump that we need for heating. If you're lucky enough to have the option of a wood stove, well, you can tune me out for a couple minutes because you're all set. For the rest of you guys that may need to come up with an alternative heating source besides just throwing another log on the fire, heat is kind of critical to survival. And the thought of doing without heat for weeks after an ice storm is pretty intense. Though many people last year dealt with lots of cold weather in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene when they didn't have a place to live or were living in a temporary structure. Now, I'm going to geek out for just a moment on you guys. If we do some math, we can come up with a general idea of how much heat we need and how much, say, propane or kerosene that we need to heat our home. There is approximately 91,000 BTUs in 1 gallon of propane. A barbecue tank has about 4.5 gallons of propane in it, the little 20-pounders. So you can take that. If you know how many BTUs your heater provides, typically that's on the box or written on the heater. Many of the little tank mount heaters will produce anywhere from about 9 to 20,000 BTUs. And we can figure out how long that tank will run that particular heater. So all you have to do is, multiply the number of gallons of propane you have by 91,000, and then divide that by your heater BTUs, and that'll tell you how long it will run it. If you happen to be lucky enough to know where to go look and know how many BTUs that your current heat pump or furnace generates that heats your house, you can kind of figure out pretty quick about how many BTUs it would take in order to heat your house off propane and how big of a heater that you need. Though most people in an emergency aren't going to try to heat their whole house, they're just going to try to heat a couple rooms to be comfortable, and they're going to just keep the rest above freezing. Kerosene is similar, with your typical gallon of kerosene producing 135,000 BTUs, about 45,000 BTUs or 44,000 BTUs more than a gallon of propane. That's about how much energy you get out of 1 gallon of kerosene. Many of your kind of standard kerosene heaters that you might find that use a wick, not the big torpedo construction site heaters, but the little simple portable, wick type kerosene heaters produce about 23,000 BTUs, which in many cases is enough to heat at least in my area, that's enough to heat 1,000 to 1,200 square foot house, depending on the insulation. Something to keep in mind there. There's a little more bang for your gallon in kerosene than there is in propane, though a lot of people don't like the smell of kerosene, so I totally understand that. Another interesting kind of bit of trivia when you're considering heating your house in the wintertime, if you're using an alternative source of heat, or not heat, but an alternative source of light, such as like a Coleman lantern that runs on propane or white gas, those things produce about 3,000 BTUs of waste heat. So even running a lamp by itself does provide a bit of additional heat. So something to factor in there if you plan on running one of those for a while. That's also something to factor in if you're running one of those of the summertime during a power outage and you don't have air conditioning in my area. It can warm the place up pretty doggone quick. Having an idea of how much heat you need and for how long, how much propane is it going to take to keep me warm for a week if the power's out, how much kerosene is it going to take, is an important thing to know, as most of us are preppers and we want to stockpile some of that stuff for the proverbial rainy day. Additionally, many of us are going to need electricity. It's just a fact of reality. I'm the communications guy, so we need electricity to run our communications gear. And oftentimes that is provided by batteries. Many of us like our lithium batteries. But remember that they will not charge below freezing, so they need to be kept at least a little bit warm in order to charge. Solar is obviously one way to charge, but you're constantly having to clean snow and ice off your solar panels. That can cause some problems, and your portable solar panels are probably not going to like being outside in an ice storm. That puts us to kind of another option for power, which is the generator. Many of us have a generator. Certainly big enough to charge batteries, or maybe run air freezers. If you have a well, maybe run your well pump. And possibly if you have a propane or natural gas furnace, to run the blower on your propane or natural gas furnace so you can just keep your heat system running as though the grid were up. So having one of those, knowing about how much fuel it takes to run for what amount of time is important, so you know how much fuel that you need. Something, another calculation to put in there. Generally, a good generator will tell you about how many gallons that it burns at what load rating, and you can use that to kind of calculate roughly how much power you need. If you're not running a heavy load, such as a air handler or a well pump or something like that, it may be much more efficient to use your generator to charge something like one of the portable power pack type things like a Blue Eddy or an EcoFlow or a Jackery or those sorts of things, because you can often recharge those in an hour or two of running the generator under a pretty good load, and then have power for a day or two to keep your deep freeze running, to keep some lights on in the house, run the TV to keep the kids entertained, whatever it is that you need to use a little bit of power for, keeping your communications gear operational, and that sort of thing. So there's a trick to extend your fuel reserves. Now, while we're talking about generators, many of us have either a propane or a gasoline generator. Some of you guys have diesel generators. That's not really what we're going to talk about today. I can do a whole episode on diesel generators if someone wants at some point, but diesel generators are kind of a bit of a different bag, and they have a lot of benefits, but a couple gotchas as well. So talking about gasoline generators in particular, if you have never run your gasoline generator or you have not tested your gasoline generator when that it is cold outside, particularly when it's below freezing, I encourage you to do that. If you haven't done that, that might be a good project for this afternoon. Because some generators out there that come from box stores, not going to point the finger at any of them, but I know a couple people that have these, that have this particular issue, and that is they don't want to start when it's below 40 degrees outside, which is fine if you're buying a generator for hurricanes. Doesn't really work if you're buying a generator for winter storms. So make sure that you can get your generator started and running when that it's cold outside, even if that involves giving it a little tickle from the ether bunny. If you don't know what that is, it's starting fluid. It will get things going in a pinch. Might be something to add to your preps. If you don't have a few cans of ether or starting fluid around, go ahead and add that to the list next time you go to visit whatever box store that you like. But make sure you can get your generator running when that it is cold outside. When it comes to communications, if the power goes out, we all know we'll use Texas several years ago. I don't remember how many years ago. That's been several years ago now. During their outage, they discovered the hard way that a lot of communication systems start to fail very quickly after the power goes down, especially when everyone starts trying to use them. Make sure you have an alternative communications plan, be that ham radio, be that Starlink, be that whatever, so that you can communicate or at least receive information. I mean, if it's nothing else, a good battery-operated radio receiver, so you can listen to local news or whatever source of information you like locally to find out, what's going on. That being said, let's kind of steer away from the winter weather preparedness. I want you guys to all be safe. I want you to, I don't want to say stay frosty, stay warm and stay safe out there in whatever sort of winter chaos happens to find you this weekend. And remember that ice breaks trees. Trees break power lines. But even enough ice can cause power lines by themselves to fall. So outages can be pretty serious after an ice storm, particularly. And it looks like a lot of people may get some ice. So be careful, guys. And it doesn't matter if you got a four-wheel drive. Ice usually wins. All right. Let's shift gears here and let's talk about this Verizon outage. Now, initially, a lot of us want to blame the Verizon outage. Oh, this was some sort of hacking event. Verizon was hacked and that caused them to go offline. That actually, sounds kind of good. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel at Grid Down Comms Up, if you're not a subscriber, I encourage you to go over, check out my YouTube channel at Grid Down Comms Up for a bit more content on communications, off-grid stuff. that sort of thing. You'll be seeing a slide here that is kind of making jokes about this being a hack. But the reality is this probably wasn't a hack. Verizon's story, and they're sticking to it, is that this was a software bug or glitch. And they may be telling the truth. A lot of folks who use other carriers that use Verizon's towers had service throughout this entire outage. So it seems very much to be an issue with phone authorization on Verizon's network. One of the things that I noticed as I was a victim of this, I was actually a late onset victim, might be the way to put this. My spouse lost her cell phone service at the very beginning. However, mine continued to work for another 6 hours before it joined the ranks of all the non-working cell phones. When mine quit working, one of the things that I observed that was very interesting, that typically does not happen when the infrastructure itself, the cell towers, the transport, that kind of thing, have an issue, is Wi-Fi calling would not work on my iPhone. It's like my cell phone number was not registered. I could make calls with Signal, I could send texts with Signal, and a few other applications that I use. But anything associated with my phone number and placing calls wouldn't work. So this generated quite a few problems all across the country during this 10-plus hour outage that seemed to surround phone authorization on Verizon's networks. And I'm not really going to delve too far into the details of Verizon's issues here, but the disruption lasted nearly 10 hours. It impacted voice, text, and data services nationwide, with over 2.3 million outage reports logged by Down Detector. If you don't know what Down Detector is, I encourage you to go check out Down Detector, the website that logs the ups and downs of various websites, hosting, and telecommunications providers. And it can kind of help you figure out what's going on at times. Now, the point of bringing up all of this with Verizon is to talk a little bit about the fragility of our infrastructure, okay? A single software bug, if that's what it was, knocked millions of people off of a data network. Those millions of people at times found themselves unable to dial 911 if they needed emergency help, because even though the phone said SOS, 911 didn't work. Many people had access issues with cloud resources that required multi-factor authentication, and if they had provided their cell phone number, the multi-factor authentication notifications just disappeared into the ether, and they could not access their resources. This caused a complete work stoppage for a lot of people in certain business sectors. I have heard stories of a few people just calling it quits and having to go home because they couldn't access anything to do their job. So a simple or not so simple cellular outage, second order impacts, stopped business in a lot of places. It also cut off telemetry feeds. A lot of people use Cradlepoint or PepWave or a variety of other companies' cellular modems to provide data at different remote locations, parking meters for in-truck dispatch for utility companies, for in-car dispatch for various other services and utilities and all kinds of different things. If those devices dropped offline, I don't know that many were affected by this. They seem to be mostly phone-oriented, but I don't have a lot of data on that at this point. But if those things drop offline, then all of a sudden, all of these things that we're used to having kind of stop working. People were not able to call their Uber to get home, and they had to come up with another source. And I don't know if you've looked around recently, but I haven't seen a payphone hanging on a wall anywhere in a long time. For those of you Gen Alpha folks that don't remember payphones, They were either a little like 4-foot square aluminum and glass box with a phone that you put money in and then you could make a phone call, or they were a little blue box hanging on the side of a building that was about 2 feet wide and about 4 feet tall that had a phone and you could put money in it and dial a phone number and place a call. We had those before cell phones were around, or at least before cell phones were quite as universal as they are today. A lot of second and third order issues kind of crept up from this that caused work stoppages. And this was only on a single carrier that not all customers were impacted by. So you can imagine if this spread and was a multi-carrier outage or some sort of intentional cyber attack or whatever that disabled multiple carriers' networks, how that this could completely grind our society to a halt as everyone is completely dependent upon their cell phones. In fact, even universities and major sporting venues were sending out email notifications to people to store a copy of their electronic tickets for sporting events, etc., on their phone before they left the house in case they didn't have service when they got there to show their tickets, because nobody prints paper tickets anymore. In fact, there's not even a way to get paper tickets in many cases anymore. This causes all kinds of problems, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, guys. So this is how critical and ingrained that we are in the current world to our critical infrastructure in the form of the little rectangle we carry around with us that tracks everything we do and everything we say and all that stuff in order to, function in daily life. In fact, if you have a Tesla, I believe your phone is your car key. Somebody who has a Tesla can educate me on that. I'm not sure. Teslas aren't really my thing. So, we have a lot of issues that can arise from cell phone outages. And we need to think about how that impacts the world around us. In fact, a lot of corporations, a lot of companies, a lot of critical infrastructure, a lot of various services that previously depended on analog telephone service or POTS, plain old telephone service, are having to migrate to cellular. And because most carriers are doing away with copper telephone lines, they are very rapidly becoming a thing of the past because AT&T, etc., no longer wants to support those services. Now, this brings us back again to this whole issue of the more we observe, the more we're around, and those of us kind of who are on the periphery or inside know that cellular networks are incredibly vulnerable. They are not built the way the copper was. Many of the old telephone systems were designed during the Cold War, and a lot of this infrastructure that was built by the Bells back then was designed to survive nuclear war with the Soviet Union. Nobody's thinking about that now. It's being built in the quickest and cheapest way, largely that it can. And redundancy and ruggedness is a distant concern from let's get it on, let's get the cash and income and revenue flowing from it, and let's let the end user worry about their own backup and their own network stability problems. And because of this, a lot of things that previously may have been very dependable are suddenly becoming a lot less dependable because this technology that supported them on the back end is going away. So I've kind of ranted a little bit about the fragility of our infrastructure, and I know you guys all know that. But I want you to understand that physical security on a lot of communications infrastructure is a joke. I won't go into details on it here. Somebody might be listening to the podcast that doesn't need to know that information. But it is not impressive at all. And the cyber, the electronic, the technological side of it has plenty of issues as well. The people managing this stuff are not necessarily the top shelf individuals. They are the cheapest individuals. So you keep that in mind and realize that companies are out to make a profit more than they are to ensure continuity of service at this point. Those days have long since passed in many cases. Now, that brings us to the question of, do you have a backup plan? What is your plan if at some point the cell networks stop working? Well, as a communications guy, that's kind of one of the things that I do with PrepperNet is how do you build those networks? How do you come up with a workable solution to communicate with those that you need to communicate with? And who do you need to communicate with in the event of some sort of situation where your conventional communications don't work? Now, as I mentioned earlier, Signal still worked on my phone when I was on Wi-Fi. So having workarounds like that is oftentimes the simplest solution. We just kind of pivot. We move from traditional cell connectivity to I'm going to use Wi-Fi and I'm going to use Signal, or I'm going to use Wi-Fi and I'm going to use the push-to-talk over cell phone app Zello, or I'm going to use Telegram, or I'm going to use whatever other platform it is that happens to be working. That is a great alternate solution. You just need to make sure all the people that you communicate with are on that platform so that you can reach them.
Hey, let's take a quick break.
Has your data been hacked? Do you feel uneasy about the vulnerability of your personal information online? Were you involved in the Target, LinkedIn, or Microsoft data leaks? Don't know? If not, then pay attention. Join Forrest Garvin from PrepperNet for a free webinar on privacy and security. Gain insights into safe internet browsing, VPNs, crafting online aliases, secure emails, detecting if your data has been hacked, and managing passwords. Secure your spot today for this webinar on privacy and security. It's free. This webinar delves into comprehensive strategies for bolstering your online privacy. We've got you covered, from fortifying your passwords to shielding your financial information and mastering state-of-the-art encryption techniques. We're offering 2 convenient dates to suit your schedule. Reserve your spot now at preppernet.com/privacy. Don't let cyber threats erode your peace of mind any longer. Take the first step toward a safer, more secure online experience by joining us for our free webinar. Remember, knowledge is power when it comes to safeguarding your privacy. Sign up now at preppernet.com/privacy. We'll see you there.
Now, in the event that it is a much broader situation and internet altogether is not working or is not working in your area, obviously Starlink can have some benefit. Works great in natural disasters. Right now in Iran, we are seeing them try to jam and or round up all the people that possess Starlinks because they are getting information out of the country from behind the iron curtain-ish that they have set up to try to prevent people from knowing what's actually going on. So Starlink is working marginally in that particular situation. They're working very hard to try to make it work, but it is resilient a bit, but it still has its own set of issues. So it can also be a good alternative. And then, of course, there is, the old standby of radios where that you can build networks and communicate locally and then over much distance. Now, when we start talking about radios and we start talking about that, there's a lot of skills that need to be brought to the table in order to communicate. The simple skills to just use the equipment and communicate effectively are one part of the puzzle for the most basic users. And then there are those users that need to understand the details of how it actually is, of what it actually takes to communicate over great distances without any infrastructure. Because, all those first responders you see walking around out there carrying those $12,000 Apex Next Motorola handhelds. Those radios are being backed up by millions, actually probably tens if not hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure, just like a cell phone, in order to make them work. It takes a lot more involved radio stuff than a simple handheld radio to communicate over any meaningful distance without some sort of infrastructure to support that communication. Lots of things to learn, lots of skills to develop there. And if you want to learn more about that stuff, you can check out my YouTube channel. You can check out the preppernet.net site and the Preppernet Communications Academy. There is some good stuff in there to kind of get you started. There will hopefully be more in there soon as we can kind of build that out maybe a little bit more. That's something that we all have to consider and look at where do we fit. And this is part of building communities, guys. So to get off on a little bit of a rabbit trail here, the PrepperNet is about communities and it's about building groups. And I'm going to go kind of a little counter to a lot of the conventional prepping wisdom here, in that building a mag group that is made up of people that are strewn all over 5 states and have hundreds of miles to travel to get to your location, well, that's great. It can work, though oftentimes it does not. One of the problems there is everybody's got to have the skills, potentially, to communicate with wherever the group is meeting and or other group members over great distances. And that's problematic for some people. It's not easy. And if you're all kind of centrally localized and located together, a couple people that know how to do this is all you need. And then the other 20 people, they don't have to know how to do this. Just like I don't want to know how to do or don't have interest in learning how to do a lot of herbal medicine things. I think it's really neat and I like the results of it, but I'm not drawn to that. I like the results, but I'm not drawn to learning all the details and intricacies of how to do that. But having somebody on my team that knows how to do that is a huge deal. It's the same with communications. Not everybody's got to be able to do the more advanced side of this. But I encourage you guys to figure out where you fit in that role and find a group, meet some people, put something together. Doesn't have to be necessarily to survive the end of the world type thing, but there's a lot of things that you can do. Now, I want to bring up something else that came across my radar yesterday. I have not had a chance to research this much yet. In fact, I think I'll probably do an episode on this particular topic soon here. But apparently amateur radio operators in the country of Belarus, which is over in the old Soviet states, the country is rounding up amateur radio operators and charging them with treason, spying, and various other crimes, and arresting them and potentially even threatening them with the death penalty because they're amateur radio operators. This is something that comes as a shock to some people, but the reality is it's the skills. Countries that particularly tend to be communist, countries that the government is authoritarian in, are terrified of the people that have the communication skills that many of us have, because we are not bound by their technological curtain of oppression. Radio waves don't care about that. They just go and go and go, and you can bounce them off the atmosphere and over thousands of miles beyond any sort of control that country has. So it's very hard for them to do things that might be considered humanitarian violations and war crimes, etc., and keep it silent when there are people that can get the word out. That's why Starlink is so dangerous to them, and that's why radio operators are so dangerous to them. Throughout history and times of war, those that have those skills are either very valuable to their governments when they are trying to do the right thing, like World War II in the U.S., or they can be very threatening to those that are trying to do the wrong things, such as Germany in World War II. So remember, you're developing skills that, while they're fun and while that many people look at it as merely a hobby, a social thing, something fun to do that is very lighthearted, not everyone views it that way. And as times change and situations change, that can change too. So we may talk a little bit more about that on another episode. I'm going to wrap this up. I've been going long enough. I want you guys to be very safe the next few days here. Hopefully this turns into a big nothing burger with the winter weather advisories and all that stuff, but I have a feeling it's not going to. I have a feeling we're going to see something. And if you happen to be the unlucky soul in the place that gets hit the worst, I hope that your skills are polished and your generators start and all that good stuff, and you are able to ride out what could be a very dangerous and uncomfortable situation in a bit of style and show off a little bit to your family and loved ones that are with you that being ready is not something that makes you crazy. It's something that means you get to continue to live in luxury when things go a bit sideways. That being said, again, check us out at preppernet.net. You can check me out at Grid Down Comms Up on YouTube. If you are interested in amateur radio, if you happen to be a general class or higher, have HF privileges, and you are into HF digital or want to be into HF digital, we have a digital training net every Sunday night at currently 0200 Zulu or 9 p.m. Eastern. Usually you can hear us in Eastern and Central time zones as we do a little bit of a get-together there, and a lot of the folks who are part of PrepperNet tune in and turn out, and we just practice some skills that might be useful at some point. Again, you guys have a wonderful weekend. This is Grid Down Comms Up on the Prepping Academy podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Prepping Academy podcast. Preppers Unite at www.preppingacademy.com.
Are you a prepper or homesteader looking to connect with like-minded people in your area? Looking to start your own preparedness group? Already have a group? Well, look no further than PrepperNet. PrepperNet is dedicated to personal responsibility, individual freedoms, and being self-reliant. PrepperNet has monthly meetings in over 100 cities where you can meet and learn with like-minded people in your area. PrepperNet, where preppers unite. Find us online at preppernet.com.